Hello and welcome to the Heartbeat Review of 2025. Over these last 6 months, we've produced 24 episodes.
We've gained around 30,000 subscribers, and we want to thank you for being with us on the journey.
This week, we wanted to pause and look back at some of the amazing guests we've had the privilege of interviewing.
We've spoken to some fascinating people, and we thought you'd like to know who we'd want to hear from again. Catherine, who were your favourite guests?
Well, my favourite guests were Josie James, who was the first person I had in studio, and she shared her testimony of having an abortion. And I also interviewed Dr. Monique Ribeiro, who champions both mother and baby, and she does it in a compassionate way. So I just loved chatting with them.
Well, let's have a listen back to both of them.
There is no perfect time to say, right, I'm ready to have this baby. I honestly don't know if I would have been ready in 2 years' time. There's always an excuse to say, maybe I should focus on my career, or maybe I should have a big house first, or maybe, whatever is in the question, the baby's in your belly now, and that baby doesn't just leave your memory after that abortion. It stays with you, and every baby you will see, like for me, any baby I would see, any child I would see, I would just wish that I would have allowed my baby to come to full term and to be able to go to school and grow up like all the other children that you see around you. And children are just so happy, and they're such loving, like innocent, amazing humans.
If a pregnancy is putting a mom's life at risk, you can deliver early. And that's exactly why we have maternal fetal medicine physicians who their job is to follow high-risk pregnancies. That's what they're trained to do. So they monitor the mom, they monitor the baby. And the minute that the mom's life is in danger or the baby's life is in danger, they make the decision to deliver early. It doesn't mean that the baby will always survive, but that baby has been honored throughout its life. It wasn't intentionally harmed and thrown in the trash.
So, William, who would you like to hear from again?
There are three main people I really enjoyed interviewing. Steventhen Holland, Tim Stanley and Delphine Chu. Now, Steventhen Holland spoke to me about his heartbreaking but ultimately hopeful story. I won't say too much. That's all I'll say for now. You watch. Tim Stanley, who's a journalist with The Telegraph, and gave us a real kind of inside scoop about the inner workings of Parliament from a pro-life perspective, albeit. And finally, Delphine Chu. She spoke to me about her experience with cancel culture. So well worth watching.
I actually found my birth uncle. He's a magician and ventriloquist from Spartanburg, South Carolina. And just for reference, I was living in Florida at the time. So it was about an hour and a half flight to get to him. So I flew to meet him about 2 months after meeting him online. And I'm standing in his living room, and for 2 days, we talked about how I came to be. And what I found out that day as a 27-year-old man, that my birth mom was actually raped by 5 men in a mental institution. He told me there were 6 kids. He was one of 6, and their parents had died. They had all been thrown into an orphanage. And when my mom aged out of the system at 18, she went into a mental facility. So it was there that she was attacked by those men, and she gets pregnant from that attack on her life. And she didn't tell anybody because she's only an 11-year-old mental capacity woman in an 18-year-old body. So, the facility, once they found out that she was pregnant, they pressured her daily to abort, to terminate her pregnancy. But by the grace of God and this amazing woman that I call my hero, she literally carried me homeless, chose life for me. There was a family that took her in actually off the streets and cared for her for 2 weeks until she gave birth to me. And I know everybody always asks, how do you get the name Steventhen? That's such a weird name. Well, that woman that I call my hero, when she gave birth to me on March 31st, 1982, in the hospital, she said, I want to name my son Stephen, then William. And my birth name was Holt, Holt. But whoever heard Stephen, then William on my birth certificate, they put Stephen and then together.
The Lords, because you just sit there and squat there for life, has the bandwidth to consider ethics and philosophy. And because you're not worried about coming across like a crank, you can say things like Theresa May said, which is there's actually a philosophical and indeed a religious principle at play here, which is that suicide is immoral. We do actually think that it's self-murder. You shouldn't be able to take your own life. It's something that our society ought to revolt against and push back against. So I wasn't surprised by that. The only thing I would say is that because I think the quality of argument was strongest on our side, we saw a lot of videos of both MPs and peers giving speeches that were so compelling that we watched them and thought, oh, we might win this. But what you didn't appreciate, if you sat through the hours and hours of speeches, is the many, many mediocre speeches from the other point of view that actually betrayed where the strength of numbers lie. So I think we all got a bit misled by how good people like Danny Kruger or Theresa May were. They didn't represent the numbers in Parliament.
And it was just so fascinating for me because I went to a pro-life launch party and wore a really nice dress. My sister wore a fantastic dress. Took a photo of us two together. There was nothing inflammatory in the photo. It was just me and my sister. And I said, standing up for the biggest form of discrimination, ribbon emoji, like really nice on my Instagram, which at the time was private. It was my personal Instagram. But a lot of magazine editors followed me. A lot of the brands followed me. And after that, it was just like an exodus. I just saw that loads of people unfollowed me. I didn't hear from anyone. And it's sad because I actually consented to my own cancellation because I didn't question it. I just was like, oh. And it went from getting, 18 emails a day from these editors commissioning me for work to nothing, to silence. Like you can look at my inbox and just like from that day to the next, there was just nothing. It was like I didn't exist anymore.
Ben, which of your guests did you enjoy speaking to the most?
Well, it's a little bit different for me because obviously I've only done one so far. But speaking to Helen Gibson was amazing. I mean, she was talking about this sense in society that people are entitled to women's bodies and they think they've got a right to children, and that was really fascinating. But also for you, we've got a sneak peek because I did an interview of Connor Tomlinson, who is a political commentator, and he was speaking very well on this idea that men aren't just becoming conservative, but actually they want to restore something, and with that restoration comes this desire to pull down the sexual revolution, effectively. And he was talking about how that works with the differences between men and women and how that's going to look when they set families up in the future.
But if you look at this from the point of view of the child, that child will be commissioned to effectively be an orphan from birth, because a lot of them will be being conceived from donor eggs. So a woman they will never know, and often around the world, donor egg use is anonymous, so they'll never know who that woman is. Then the dead father's sperm, so the father is already dead before they're even conceived. And then the surrogate mother, in many cases, has no ongoing contact with the child and may live abroad. So the child is commissioned with the express intent of them being effectively an orphan and being raised by grandparents. Now, some grandparents, I think in this case, with Sharon you mentioned, her son was 19, so perhaps she might be only in her sort of 40s or early 50s. But even so, the older you are when you commission a child like this or have a child late, the less likelihood you've got of seeing them through to adulthood. It's a profoundly cruel thing to do to a baby, to treat them in this way as though they're some sort of replacement for the dead genetic parent. Allegedly, Dustin Lance Black, who is Tom Daley, the Olympic diver's partner, was really shocked when they were looking into having children and realised that we didn't have legally enforceable surrogacy contracts in the UK. You could not contract a woman to do this here. She had the right to keep her child. And that surprised him because in America, you can just contract a woman to do this and she must see it through or you can sue her. So there is a real creeping sense of entitlement to women's bodies and to children, and the idea that you have a right to have a child. And nobody has a right to have a child. It's not a human right at all, actually.
And I just concluded the algorithm is basically demonic. This comes back to the why aren't men and women meeting. It's the technology, right? It's this Faustian bargain that promises you to meet this hypothetical soulmate, this perfect person for you, and then that you have infinite options of all the people prospectively in the world if you set your parameters wide enough, and that if you just fashion yourself as a kind of Amazon product, the perfect person will come along and take you off the shelf. Instead, there's an incentive to commodify yourself, and then the algorithm rations the kind of people that are eligible to you to keep you in a limbo state so that you don't give up entirely and delete the app. The polling is quite bleak in America, where I think it was an NBC News poll a few weeks ago where it said that Republican men put having a family as their top priority, but both Republican and Democrat women put financial independence and a career as their top priority. So that means that even among conservative circles, there's still girl boss feminism kind of polluting the pool. Whereas over here, there's a lot of different studies and the progressivism is quite bad among young women. But when you ask, for example, when you poll young women, do they want to have a family? 92% say yes. They just haven't matched that desire up with their progressive ideology, and there are too many economic barriers that discourage it, that get in the way. And then when you ask mothers, okay, would you rather stay at home, or would you rather go back to work full time, or would you rather work part time, or would you rather the state takes care of your children in state-funded daycare? There is at least a third of women who want to be full-time stay-at-home mums, a third of women who want part-time work. Only about a third want to go back full-time and offhand their kid onto a state-funded daycare apparatus. And yet the state is in direct contravention to this because every single party, I think other than Reform at the last election, but I don't know if they've updated their family policy yet, have said, we're going to invest more in state-funded childcare, we're going to give you toothbrushing sessions, we're going to give you as little time with your children as possible so that you can go and fill out spreadsheets and grow the GDP.
Peter, were there any of your interviews that you'd like to conduct again?
Yeah, there were. I was absolutely delighted to get the chance to sit down with Sir Brian Souter, who gave us a fascinating interview from a very, very unique perspective. One thing he said, which really struck me talking about late-term abortions, was, this isn't abortion, this is infanticide. I found that absolutely hit the nail on the head. Another one was the president of the Bishops' Conference of Scotland, Bishop John Keenan. Everything he had to say was really interesting and very, very insightful. But what really struck me was he finished by thanking everyone at SPUC for what we do and reminded us how important this work is. It's worth a listen again.
We already have the most liberal abortion laws in the world, right? And now we're talking about allowing someone to terminate that child up to 39 weeks. This is not abortion any longer. This is infanticide. And what we're doing is we're legalizing infanticide. Now, if you sit someone down and talk them through this, they will be as just as shocked as I have been about it. It's interesting. Not many people are really talking about this, but if you engage someone in conversation, say, do you realize what this actually involves and what it means? Right? They are absolutely horrified because there's still big percentages of people in this country that are very uneasy about abortion.
Thank you, Peter. It's always a privilege for me to be helping out in any way that I can in the pro-life cause, and to thank all of them you who are involved in SPUC for the wonderful work you do. It has to be, for me, the number one social justice issue of our times, but it does require a lot of courage, a bravery, faith, perseverance to continue in this work. But I do think in generations to come we'll thank you for what you've done and see you as the heroes of the times.
We hope you've enjoyed all of the interviews we've brought you and that you'll keep watching in 2026. We've a lot more in store for you on Heartbeat, so thank you for watching.